Brace yourself. This gets intense. Hollywood sold you a lie about the Old West. The real story of what the Apache faced is a nightmare most people have never heard. Number 9. You were public enemy number 1. To 2 different countries. You know that feeling of being caught between a rock and a hard place? Like when your parents want you to go to law school, but your dream is to be a TikTok artist. Now, imagine instead of your parents, it's 2 entire governments, and instead of disapproval, they want your scalp, literally. The Apache didn't just have to deal with the relentless expansion of the United States from the east, a growing industrial giant with an insatiable appetite for land. They were also in a near-perpetual state of bloody warfare with Mexico to the south, which had viewed them as a threat for centuries. There was no neutral zone, no Switzerland to run to. It was like playing a video game on the hardest difficulty, where you're stuck on a map with a 5-star wanted level in 2 countries at the same time. Fleeing the U.S. Cavalry across the border only meant running into the Mexican army, and they were notoriously brutal, often taking no prisoners. This constant 2-front pressure forged the Apache into some of the greatest guerrilla warfare experts the world has ever seen. But what a terrible price to pay. Every sunrise wasn't a promise, it was a question. Will the attack come from the mountains to the north or the deserts to the south? It was a Texas-sized geopolitical trap, and you were right in the middle of it. Number 8. The government paid for your death, like a sick bounty program. We all know loyalty programs. Buy 9 coffees, get the 10th one free. In the 19th century Southwest, there was a different, state-sponsored rewards program. Bring in the scalp of an Apache man, woman, or child and get a cash payout. Yes, you heard that right. Governments in Mexican states like Chihuahua and Sonora, and even local initiatives on the American side, created a market for murder. Your very existence was monetized. Imagine opening the morning paper and seeing the market prices, not for cattle, but for your family's body parts. $100 for a warrior's scalp, $50 for a woman's, $25 for a child's. This turned the frontier into a free-for-all hunting ground. It was the original gig economy, only the gig was murder. Ranchers, miners, outlaws, and professional bounty hunters could all supplement their income by hunting people. This wasn't war, it was outsourced extermination. This policy turned neighbors into monsters and made every stranger a potential deadly threat. Walking through your own ancestral lands was like wearing a neon target on your back during Black Friday at a Walmart. It was capitalism at its most depraved. Number 7. Treaties were as trustworthy as an email from a Nigerian prince. Ever signed a 40-page cell phone contract? Do you trust the company not to slip in hidden fees next month? Now multiply that distrust by 1,000. The Apache would sign treaties with the U.S. government, often believing they were securing peace, land, and the future for their children. But to the American government, these treaties were less of a sacred pact and more of a temporary obstacle. They were like Apple's terms of service. Nobody really reads them, and the company can unilaterally change them whenever they want. The great Chiricahua leader Cochise negotiated in good faith to secure a homeland for his people in their own territory, only for the government to renege on the deal as soon as he died. The phrase forever in treaty language usually meant until we find gold or silver on it. It was a depressing, endless cycle. Conflict, negotiation, treaty, broken promises, and conflict again. It's like an NFL team owner swearing loyalty to a city, only to move the team in the middle of the night to a shiny new stadium in Vegas. Except instead of losing a football team, you lost your country, your home, and your way of life. This systematic dishonesty made any hope for peace a cruel mirage in the desert. Number 6. Your diet was starvation, with a side of desperation. Think about your weekly trip to Whole Foods or Trader Joe's with its overflowing aisles. Now, imagine that as a strategy of war, the government decides to not only bomb every supermarket, but to also poison the farms and systematically exterminate all the livestock in the region. That was the U.S. Army's scorched earth policy against the Apache. Generals like George Crook perfected this tactic. They realized they couldn't beat the Apache in their own territory in a straight-up fight, so they attacked their life source, their food. They burned fields of corn, beans, and squash, They destroyed hidden caches of food. They led massive campaigns to slaughter bison, deer, and other game. Hunger wasn't an unfortunate side effect of the war. It was the primary weapon. It was low-tech biological warfare. They wanted to break the Apache spirit by starving them into submission. Imagine the agony of watching your children cry from hunger, knowing the land that once provided everything in abundance has been intentionally emptied. Forget bullets. An empty stomach is the most demoralizing weapon of all. Try fighting for your freedom when you haven't eaten in days. Number 5. Education meant erasing who you were. Remember the DARE program in school? The one that told you to just say no? Well, the federal government had a similar program for Apache children, but it was about just saying no to your entire culture, your language, your religion, and your family. The official policy, coined by Captain Richard Henry Pratt, was to kill the Indian in him and save the man. Apache children, some as young as 5 or 6, were forcibly taken from their parents and sent to boarding schools hundreds, sometimes thousands, of miles away. There, they underwent a brutal transformation. Their long hair, often of great spiritual significance, was cut. Their traditional clothes were exchanged for military-style uniforms. They were forbidden, under penalty of severe beatings, from speaking their own language. Their Apache names were replaced with generic English ones like John or Sarah. It was an industrial-scale program of brainwashing, designed to produce a generation that hated themselves. Imagine the psychological trauma of being punished for being who you are. It's a type of cruelty that leaves no visible scars but echoes for generations. They didn't just want the land. They wanted to erase the very idea of being Apache. Number 4. You lived under constant surveillance, like a dystopian reality show. Do you ever feel watched when your phone serves you an ad for something you just mentioned in a conversation? It's a little creepy, right? Now imagine that feeling 24/7, but instead of sneaker ads, it's you. Cavalry soldiers with rifles. To combat the Apache, the Army built a network of forts all over their territory. But the real game changer was the heliograph. This was the Victorian-era internet. Using mirrors to flash sunlight, they could send Morse code messages almost instantly across vast distances. A patrol could spot an Apache group, and within minutes, every garrison in a 200-mile radius knew their location and direction. The Apache, the masters of stealth and terrain, suddenly found themselves in an electronic cage. Every move was tracked. There was no privacy. There was no safe refuge. It was like living your entire life on a live stream for an audience that wants to kill you, where every misstep is clipped and shared with the enemy. The freedom to simply move, to exist unwatched in your own home, was systematically eliminated. Number 3. Getting moved to a reservation was like being exiled to Alcatraz. Imagine the government takes you from your home in Beverly Hills and forces you to move to a toxic waste dump in the middle of the Mojave Desert. And, to make things more fun, they also move your worst enemies in right next door. Welcome to reservation life, 19th century style. The San Carlos Reservation in Arizona, where many Apache were forced to go, was so notoriously bad that it was known by soldiers and the Apache themselves as Hell's 40 Acres. It was a barren wasteland, malaria-ridden with undrinkable alkaline water and extreme temperatures. The food rations promised by the government rarely arrived, and when they did, they were often sold off by corrupt agents or were rotten. Worse, different Apache bands, some of whom were historical rivals, were crammed together, creating constant tension and violence. It was less a reservation and more an open-air concentration camp, designed for one purpose: to break the will of a people. It's no wonder that great leaders like Geronimo would rather risk near-certain death on the warpath than slowly rot in a place like that. Number 2. You were the villain in every movie before movies even existed. Today, we talk about fake news and online propaganda. In the 19th century, the anti-Apache propaganda machine was running at full steam, and it was incredibly effective. Newspapers back east, dime novels, the action paperbacks of the day, and exaggerated military reports painted the Apache not as people defending their homes and families, but as bloodthirsty monsters, desert demons who killed for sport. This relentless dehumanization was a crucial tool of war. It's much easier for the American public in New York or Boston to accept land theft, forced displacement, and genocide when they're led to believe the victims aren't fully human. They turned you into the boogeyman of the frontier, a savage obstacle to manifest destiny. You weren't a father, a husband, or a son. You were a savage, a red devil. This smear campaign was so successful that the stereotype of the Apache as the cruel, one-dimensional villain persisted for over a century in American pop culture. Before a single movie was ever made, your character had already been cast as the bad guy. Number 1, the deepest loss, wasn't of land or life, but of an entire universe. This is the one that transcends everything else. To lose a battle is one thing. To lose your land is devastating. But what the Apache lost was deeper. It was the loss of an entire universe. To the Apache, the land was not a resource to be exploited. It was a living, sacred being. Every mountain, every river, every canyon had a name, a story, a spiritual purpose. They were their cathedrals, their libraries, their book of Genesis, their deities. The Ga'an lived in specific mountains. Their ancestors were buried under that soil, and their spiritual power remained there. So, when American miners came and started dynamiting a sacred mountain for silver, they weren't just mining rocks. In the eyes of the Apache, they were literally blowing up the body of a god. When they dammed rivers, they weren't just changing a waterway, they were severing a spiritual lifeline. Imagine watching the Grand Canyon being turned into a landfill or the Sistine Chapel being converted into a casino. It is that level of existential pain. It was the destruction not just of a people, but of a cosmology, of an entire way of understanding reality. And that is the deepest wound of all, one that money can't buy back and a treaty cannot heal. So, the next time you watch an old Western and see the Indians attacking, remember what you saw here today. History is rarely as simple as good guys and bad guys. More often, it's about desperate people trying to survive in a world that is actively trying to erase them. The resilience of the Apache people, in the face of all this, is nothing short of miraculous. And that's a wrap for this one. Stay tuned for more powerful stories. Subscribe now.